Moving in with 2 babies, we faced noisy neighbors who got raided after I reported their illegal broadcasts justice served. Upon discovering that we were expecting not just 1, but 2 children, it became clear we had to find a larger home with more space. At that time, we were still residing in a 1-bedroom studio apartment situated 1 floor above the ground level. Its sole access was via a metal fire escape stairway, which was hardly suitable for a pregnant woman, let alone for living with 2 small infants. Therefore, we located a privately rented house that had been recently renovated and offered the space and large garden we desired. We signed the lease and promptly retrieved the keys. As the owner departed, the woman next door approached me, immediately insisting that we refrain from making noise before noon since her boyfriend worked night shifts and needed to sleep, along with a long list of other do's and don'ts. Right from the start, it was clear trouble was ahead. Given the house was fully renovated and required minimal work, we decided that it was best not to antagonize anyone and to limit noisy activities until afternoon. We moved in 2 weeks later, and the entire street was warm and inviting. My wife was nearing her due date with our twin daughters, and a number of neighbors offered assistance with anything we needed. Truly kind people. They also shared information about our neighbors. No one had a good word to say about them. The man was a notorious bully who often quarreled with everyone. They were also referred to as radio pirates due to their illegal broadcasting of loud Dutch music, which could only be described as auditory torment, alongside their parties that lasted from Thursday through Sunday until 5 a.m. There was constant loud music, yelling, and drunken behavior. It was certainly not an ideal situation for us to move into, especially with 2 babies on the horizon. The partying commenced immediately, at full volume. Quite ironic for someone who insisted on peace and quiet under the pretense of needing beauty sleep. One day, my father-in-law came over to lay new sod in the yard, parking his trailer in the back area, which is public space. This apparently did not sit well with the neighbor, who insisted that space belonged to him and demanded we move the trailer. Not going to happen, as I had no intention of walking all the way around the house with heavy sods. He became angry and insisted I move it, to which I responded in no uncertain terms. I was finished with him at that moment, and although I am ginger-haired and thus stereotypically known for having a temper, I usually keep it in check until provoked repeatedly. Anyone who knows me would agree that it takes considerable effort to get me to react. After we continued with our work, the day came to an end, and my father-in-law was preparing to leave. He hooked up the trailer when suddenly, there was the neighbor, confronting him and yelling that it was his spot and threatening consequences if it happened again. I can tolerate a lot, but when it comes to threatening my family, that is crossing the line. I stepped outside and firmly told him to back off or he would regret it. While it was a complete bluff, I have a temper, but am not very physically imposing and lack fighting skills, he retreated. My father-in-law left, and when I returned indoors, I found my wife in tears. She was frightened that he might do something to either her father or me, and we did not need that kind of stress at this moment, especially with her pregnancy hormones complicating things. As time passed without any significant incidents, we reached the moment when my wife went into labor. The delivery was anything but smooth. She ended up needing a cesarean section because our second daughter was nearly strangled by the umbilical cord. We remained in the hospital for 3 long nights, filled with challenges. Finally, we were able to return home, and our family had decorated our front yard with a huge sign welcoming the babies. This sign had been in place for a few days before our arrival, so our friendly neighbors were undoubtedly aware. But did they care? Not in the slightest. From the very first night, they churned back into their party routine, blasting their awful music, starting at noon and continuing until 5 or 6 in the morning. It was outrageous. This carried on for days, so their loud activities weren't limited to just Thursday through Sunday. They went on all week and into the next. We were exhausted, functioning on very little sleep, and one of our daughters experienced severe cramps, compounded by the noise, which made her cry incessantly. That is when I reached my breaking point. I started researching information on radio piracy, relevant laws, and the legalities surrounding the large antenna in his backyard, which was illegal itself. Additionally, he was using it for illegal radio broadcasts, indicating he possessed a substantial amount of illegal equipment which, if reported, could lead to significant fines and possibly jail time. While I did not immediately report him, I was first looking for another place to rent. This was because I believed involvement would anger him further, and it would not be prudent to leave my wife and 2 children alone during the day while I went to work. You might wonder why I didn't just involve the police. The reason is that they are completely ineffective in such situations. We had once called them. Their response still unsettles me. They merely rang the doorbell, introduced themselves as responding to our noise complaint, and essentially revealed we were the source of the call. They told the neighbors to keep their volume down, and that was the end of it. They didn't follow up with us at all. Consequently, the neighbor became even angrier and yelled at me the next day over the fence, reiterating that I should not do that again. I conveyed this new threat to the police, but without witnesses, yet again, there was nothing they could do. Days later, I walked out the front door just as he was stepping out of his car. He confronted me, demanding I trim our ivy that was growing along our side of the fence, claiming it was entangled with his large antenna. He stated he would be gone for a while and that I could come into his yard to trim the ivy. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in my mind. I told him I would certainly take care of that right away. This was a perfect opportunity for me to ascertain the make and model of his antenna, its signal strength, cable routes, and the type of cables involved, as well as get a good look at his illicit equipment through the window to take photographs. After trimming the ivy and gathering my evidence, that evening I went online to identify the proper protocol for reporting a broadcast pirate and learned that I needed to contact both the Telecommunications Authority and the police. Although I had reservations about involving the latter, I remembered that my nephew worked for the police force. His lie was immigration, but he knew enough colleagues who could assist us without alerting the neighbor to my involvement, which was vital for our safety. I shared all the evidence I had compiled with both the agency and the police, directing their attention to the frequencies he was using to pirate signals. A neighborhood investigation unfolded, which was not strictly necessary, but was intended to protect us by making it appear that he had been apprehended by chance while the authorities were running an active investigation in our neighborhood. We requested that they delay the raid. Yes, they do conduct raids on pirates' homes, typically in the early morning when he would be less likely to escape or hide any evidence. We moved 2 weeks later, and just 2 days after our relocation, they raided him. They seized all of his equipment, including computers, radios, cell phones, and his car. He left in handcuffs, and so did his girlfriend for attempting to make a scene and interfering. I received live updates from one of my former neighbors who was just as ecstatic about the turn of events. It emerged that this wasn't his first offense, but rather his third. His car lacked insurance and had failed its inspection. Typically, this wouldn't have significant consequences because he was not driving when they raided him, but they had been surveilling him for a week, which meant he was indeed caught driving without insurance and a valid inspection. He faced a fine of approximately 30,000 euros, served 12 weeks in jail, and all confiscated items were destroyed except for the vehicle. His girlfriend was sentenced to 40 hours of community service. They were forced to sell their house, bringing much relief to the neighborhood, which was finally free from them. As I mentioned earlier, I am capable of fighting, but I play very dirty. It takes a considerable provocation for me to get to that point, and they certainly succeeded, facing the repercussions. Over a year later, while grocery shopping, I stumbled upon them. Their scornful expressions could have been lethal. If looks could kill, I would have been a pile of ashes. But I took no further action. It feels quite overwhelming to receive such admiration. Numerous gold and silver awards, heartfelt, masterful, and many upvotes. Thank you all for your kindness. I genuinely do not know what to do with gold or silver awards, but I assure you I will use them to give back. Transforming this difficult phase in our lives into something positive is the best way forward. Story 2. I revealed my double life to friends. They told my family. I got searched for blades at school. I felt humiliated and alone. Trigger warning, I suppose. Self-harm and suicide. I need to express my feelings. I must include all the details. I want to find out if this makes me a bad person. I am seeking opinions. If there is another subreddit where I could share this, please inform me. If this violates the rules of this subreddit, I apologize. On October 4, 2024, my real-life friends discovered the truth. In the time leading up to that day, I had been living a dual existence. To my friends, I portrayed myself as kind. I joked, offered support during difficult times, and was generally caring. However, once I returned home from school, I transformed into someone entirely different, a reckless and impulsive individual on the internet who was willing to harm others for my own gratification. Unfortunately, I was naive enough to let my two lives intersect. I openly displayed my self-harm to people online, not caring since I was desperately seeking attention. I shared things with strangers that I would rather die than let anyone in my real life know all my suicidal thoughts and my anxiety about turning 18. It embarrasses me to admit it, but I even carved people's names into my skin to manipulate them emotionally. On that fateful day, October 4, 2024, some of my online friends pleaded with me to include them in my Discord server that included my real-life friends. I reluctantly agreed, but only if they promised not to share any personal information with my real-life friends. When my online friends saw my erratic behavior, they concluded that I required help. One of them divulged everything to my real-life friends, my suicidal thoughts, images of my self-harm, the entire situation. My real-life friends acted quickly, contacting my mother, the school officials, the police, and even my little brother. It was a terrible experience. That night, I was at an amusement park with my family, and the events ruined what should have been a fun evening. Those haunting memories overshadowed everything. My family was probably the last group of people I wanted to be aware of all this. I felt wounded. Deep down, I understood that my friends acted from a place of concern. But did that justify the pain their actions inflicted upon me? They took action without discussing it with me first. They didn't reach out to me for clarification. They just proceeded without hesitation. I spent days wishing for my friends to behave differently. I hoped they could have approached the situation in a manner that wouldn't place me in such distressing circumstances. I understood their intentions were to help, but couldn't they have chosen a different path? Loyalty meant the world to me, and this felt disloyal. I wouldn't have acted that way toward my friends. Maybe they considered it loyalty, but it affected me profoundly. Additionally, I discovered that my real-life friend and my online friend exchanged photos of my face, which was especially humiliating for me. When I mention leading a double life, I truly mean it. I dress differently at school, sporting completely different outfits in the selfies I post online. The collision of my two worlds was incredibly distressing, and I regretted allowing them to intersect. I was infuriated. The following day, I blocked all of them, informing one friend that she was no longer part of my life. I exited that Discord server. When I returned to school that week, I was summoned to the office. The dean searched my backpack and clothing for weapons. They subjected me to all those uncomfortable inquiries about suicide. They even insisted my mother take me to the hospital, which she did. It was a challenging situation. Those feelings were unbearable, and I want to clarify that none of this helped me in any way. At the hospital, I waited 8 hours, uncertain whether I'd be admitted to a psychiatric facility. Thankfully, the answer was no. However, it became another troubling experience stemming from the initial incident. I ended up skipping the rest of the school week. I simply couldn't return there. I want to convey that being searched by the dean is an incredibly humiliating experience. Anytime I voiced my hurt, I was reminded that my friends wanted to help me. I understand that, but it doesn't alleviate my pain, does it? I was reluctant to go back, believing those humiliating feelings would resurface. By the end of my week-long absence, it dawned on me that I would return to an empty social life with no friends. So I rejoined my Discord server. I began engaging in the chat, attempting to be funny and gain my friends' attention, but they all remained unresponsive. I started sending numerous edits of a fictional character named Ashley Graves. Remember how I said they exchanged photos of my face? I sent that girl's picture to the online friend who had shared my face. I admit that was messed up, and I won't try to justify it. I kept talking and talking, yet nobody replied. I claimed I would return to school that coming Monday and expressed my excitement to see them. I included a taunt directed at the specific friend, stating that I leaked her face to numerous strangers online. It was a lie, but I wanted it to sting. I followed that with, "Since you did the same to me, It's only fair. Eventually, I sent a picture of Ashley holding a gun along with the message, "See you all at nutrition." However, when I arrived at school, I was pulled from class and had my bag searched for firearms due to the messages I had sent on Discord. I found the situation quite amusing, understanding fully why they acted as they did. Unlike the situation before, when my friends reported me, I wasn't hurt this time. I completely grasped their reasoning. The subsequent weeks at school, I felt utterly alone. I yearned for friendships. I'm not the type to initiate friendships, so I knew forging new connections was unlikely. I needed to win these friends back. I sent them texts apologizing for my previous behavior, hoping that I would receive an acknowledgement of my apology in return. I recognized that they had no obligation to apologize for trying to help, but whether they intended to or not, they caused me pain. It would have been nice for them to recognize the hurt they inflicted upon me. One friend did respond, expressing a desire to move past this situation and possibly rekindle our friendship. It wasn't an apology, but it was certainly better than nothing at all. More weeks passed where I barely communicated with my friends. I decided to reach out to them again. I had no idea what discussions took place in private messages between my online friend and my real-life friends. I felt that for my own closure, I needed to learn what they had said about me. Thus, I messaged her, seeking all the details regarding the events of October 4, 2024. I received no reply. Later, I got a text from that online friend asking why I had inquired about my real-life friends. This impacted me deeply. Why were my real-life friends sharing my private struggles with a random internet stranger, as if they could confide in them more than me? Yes, that hurt deeply. I started texting all my friends. I can't recall exactly what I said. I believe I attempted to provoke them, suggesting that I was aware of their actions and they couldn't conceal anything from me. There was no response, and part of me anticipated that outcome. I chose to let it go, but the anger was consuming. They reported me to others, placing me in distressing situations, only to effectively ignore me afterward. Each day at school, I felt solitary. I constantly dreamt of these friends in my sleep. The dreams were a mixture of reconnecting with them and becoming friends again, or seeking revenge. I was angry, yet desperate to have them back. A part of me felt entitled to some form of elaborate retaliation. If they could hurt me, then I should have the right to harm them, or so I thought. I know this mindset isn't justified, but there's a part of me that subscribes to it. I think about them every day and it brings me sorrow. I cry. It's painful. I yearn for a different outcome. I wish they had handled things differently. I wish I had acted differently. I wish everything had gone differently. My emotions are a whirlwind of sadness, longing, anxiety, and anger. I crave revenge. It's been months. I often dwell on it. I fantasize about them experiencing guilt. I am the one left without friends while they maintain their entire social circle. I recognize that this situation must have caused them pain too. However, I am unable to see past my own suffering, which could have been averted. I accept that my foolishness played a role in this, but they contributed as well. It torments me. I have accepted that these feelings will haunt me for the duration of my life. I will have my revenge. There, I've expressed everything. I know I am a bad person, and perhaps I have accepted that facet of myself. I needed to voice my thoughts. I had to articulate my feelings. I am unsure if this violates the subreddit's rules, but I couldn't find any other community that would allow a post like this. Does this make me a terrible person, unreasonable, narcissistic? I don't truly know. I have never communicated the full story like this before. Story 3. I struggled with performance anxiety during sex, leading to doubt about attraction and our relationship. Pressure to climax is overwhelming. Hello, everyone. As indicated in the title, I am seeking guidance on how to better communicate with my partner about some recurring issues I experience regarding sexual performance. Thank you in advance for taking the time to read this. I truly appreciate it. Some background information: we have been in a relationship for almost 2 years, recently got engaged, and overall, have a healthy sexual life and relationship. We seldom have disagreements or significant issues, are aligned in our interests and long-term objectives, and generally engage in sexual activity 3 to 4 times a week. The recurring problem we face intermittently, approximately 5 or 6 times throughout our relationship, is that I find myself unable to reach climax during sexual intercourse. Consequently, this leads her to feel very self-conscious and start doubting the quality of our relationship and sexual connection. This first occurred relatively early in our relationship. In fact, I think that during our initial sexual encounter, I struggled to maintain an erection because I was anxious about my ability to perform for our first experience together. For those who have never faced this predicament, it is essentially a self-fulfilling cycle of anxiety where, for various reasons, typically if I am experiencing decreased sensitivity, stress, distraction, or fatigue, I begin to wonder if I will be able to climax, and if she will end up disappointed. Once I start down this train of thought, it is challenging for me to break free, as I become disconnected from the moment and consumed by self-doubt, which only intensifies my feelings. During the initial occurrences of this issue, she was understandably upset and began to question whether I was genuinely attracted to her, whether she was sufficient, and so on. Apparently, she had never encountered a partner who was unable to climax, making this situation unfamiliar for her. I did my best to explain that it genuinely was not her fault, but rather my own tendency to overthink during sex and not be able to reach climax, especially when I feel pressured to perform for any reason. Typically, she might be upset for the evening, but soon afterward, either the next day or shortly thereafter, we enjoy sex without issues, and months may pass with everything being perfectly fine. It becomes simply a minor setback. Then, the cycle may begin anew. Perhaps I am stressed, elevated, or lacking self-confidence for some reason and cannot climax, initiating the same thought pattern where she assumes I am no longer attracted to her, that she is the problem, or that I might want to pursue other romantic interests, among other thoughts. It is undeniably hurtful to hear her express such things because I have no desire to be with anyone else, and I dislike that she reassesses the validity and strength of our relationship based on a single night of sexual activity that did not culminate in climax, despite being otherwise enjoyable. I convey this to her, explaining that when she reacts strongly to unexpected outcomes, it heightens my anxiety and intensifies my worry about performing well the next time, given that my inability to climax consistently elicits her evident disappointment and questions about our relationship. I have shared that, while I understand her feelings of disappointment as I feel it too, I believe it would be more beneficial if we simply acknowledged when things don't go as planned, reassuring each other that it is not a significant issue and that we can try again when the time is right, allowing the pressure to dissipate and reaffirming that she remains supportive. With all this in mind, we have recently expressed a desire to start trying to conceive and have begun looking into optimal times for sexual activity throughout her cycle to enhance our chances. Last night, she mentioned, "All right, we need to have sex every day this week to maximize our chances." I did not respond in the manner she anticipated. I expressed my concern that I might not be able to perform every day. She believes that I should feel excitement and that sexual encounters should come easily, which I can empathize with, but I was merely trying to convey that I do not want our intimate moments to feel like a chore or obligation, contingent upon whether or not I can achieve climax. We enjoy keeping our sexual experiences novel by incorporating toys, concepts, and outfits. We both share an interest in anal play. She is keen on creating videos, and I have purchased her a skirt and a onesie with a flap at the back that I appreciate seeing her wear, in addition to several other toys that we both enjoy. However, she has a notably high sex drive and could engage in sexual activity daily, with or without these additions, though she does enjoy them. She has only declined sex on a few occasions due to fatigue, so she does not fully grasp why I sometimes require more time to get into the mood, or why I appreciate spicing things up occasionally. I made an error when I responded to her remark about needing to have sex every day this week with, "We might need to get you some more outfits." This came across as if I would only be interested in having sexual encounters each day if there was an added element of excitement, rather than something fun and enjoyable for both of us. I recognize that I could have communicated this better and understand why she felt my statement, combined with my fear of not being able to perform, contributed to her doubts. In any case, we proceeded to have sex after resolving our earlier discussion, and, unfortunately, My anxiety surfaced again. I likely became preoccupied due to our previous conversation and sharing my concern, which ultimately prevented me from reaching climax last night. I apologized and explained that I was overthinking. This was the first time in months that I had encountered this issue, and our sexual experiences otherwise had been great, and suggested we could try again the following day. After we washed up and returned to bed, she seemed notably upset, distant, and visibly affected by the situation. She immediately expressed her doubts about our chances of conceiving. Mind you, we have only just begun trying. This was the first time I faced this issue since deciding to attempt to conceive, and she discontinued birth control just over a month ago. I conveyed to her that it pains me when she expresses such thoughts in response to one unproductive night, as this is precisely the kind of situation that induces my anxiety in the first place. She reiterated her concerns that she questions whether I find her attractive and does not understand why I am not excited about the prospect of having sex every day, insisting that it should feel easy. I reassured her that I do find her attractive, that I had just explained moments before why I felt anxious about the goal of daily sexual activity, and that we had previously discussed how her strong reactions following an isolated night without climax, even when the experience was otherwise enjoyable, only exacerbates my anxiety. I also pointed out that there are no other aspects of our relationship or life in which we perceive a 98% success rate as a failure. Personally, I do not categorize these nights as failures. They were still enjoyable, but it is the responses following these events that create difficulties for me, and that, like every couple, we occasionally experience disagreements or miscommunications, yet I never hear her, suggesting that those areas of our lives must be completely easy. She then inquired whether we should consider in vitro fertilization since I expressed doubt about my ability to perform consistently. I told her that this was hurtful, reiterating that I do not believe that one night of being unable to climax should define our sexual life or our potential to conceive, particularly so early in our journey. It's not that I doubt our ability to engage in sexual activity daily. I merely want to express that the idea of needing to achieve this daily routine places pressure on me, not that I wouldn't desire it. I am trying to open up about the vulnerability I experience when the quality and success of our sexual encounters, and now the possibility of pregnancy, are dependent on my ability to climax. In summary, whenever we engage in sexual activity and I am unable to reach climax, again, this has only occurred 5 or 6 times during our 2-year relationship. It inevitably leads her to question my attraction to her, the overall quality of our relationship, and now the likelihood of having children, at this rate. It is quite jarring for me to transition from what appears to be a wonderful relationship with few and infrequent problems to it feeling completely turned upside down simply due to my inability to climax, especially after I have articulated how and why this occurs, and how we can more easily move past these situations. However, she still reacts in ways that only contribute to the same issue, and I am at a loss for how to respond anymore. I would appreciate any advice. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Story 4. As a child, I turned fear into pleasure alone at home, and by 15, I discovered intense, dark relationships. Now, I just want to be normal. This is a very lengthy post. I apologize for that. Trigger warning: distressing topics. Watching Nosferatu 2024 profoundly affected me, and I found myself in tears afterward. Since then, I have been reflecting deeply. I genuinely do not want to desire what I do crave. I truly dislike what I yearn for. This is not a new feeling. I have long wished to be liberated from this. I earnestly desire to simply be ordinary, as my sexual inclinations are not constructive, but rather harmful, specifically BDSM, related to the submissive and masochistic aspects. I doubt a rational, healthy, and traditional man would view me the same way if he discovered my interests. Additionally, those who are into such activities do not necessarily align with my values and principles. For instance, I identify as very straight, exceedingly monogamous, old-fashioned, and in fact, I am still a virgin and adhere to my religious beliefs. I just want to rid myself of this mental burden and be normal. I spent a lot of time contemplating over the last month and recalled several memories. When I was around 11 or 12, my mother began working, which meant I would be home alone after school from about 2 p.m. until 7 p.m. I would become incredibly anxious being alone at home, even with the television on, but one day I realized that masturbating unexpectedly eliminated my fear, and it turned into a habit not just because it was pleasurable, but because afterward, I wouldn't feel any anxiety. As I matured, and I apologize for the crudeness of this description, I found that imagining a ghost or demon engaging with me rendered my solitude less frightening. As a child, I was always drawn to dark themes. I enjoyed watching horror shows, films, and crime documentaries. My parents did as well, amusingly. I simply had a more morbid perspective, and discovering music, art, and cinema during my teenage years as an emo goth further shaped that inclination. I recall having a daydream when I was around 12 or 13 about a boyfriend who would kiss me while stabbing a knife into my chest, feeling apologetic about the act. There was something about ownership or jealousy, but I don't completely recall. The stabbing wasn't intended as an act of hatred, which feels extremely strange to express. At 15, I entered my first relationship, which was exclusively a long-distance romance with someone just a year older than me, separated by different continents. I longed for love passionately. Like many children, I was attracted to him because we shared a fondness for the same musical bands and interests. I was infatuated with music, which was my entire existence, and it still remains central to my life. He was a musician as well. I secretly adored him for several months, approximately 8-9, before he expressed his feelings, and we officially became a couple. We were very close, yet he had a troubled upbringing. Similarly, I faced my own challenges witnessing domestic violence, having an alcoholic father, experiencing verbal and physical abuse from my mother, and being molested by a cousin as a child. And his circle included friends with a range of issues, one of whom aspired to be a serial killer. Notably, this person had a diagnosed mental illness and received disability due to it. Naturally, all of this had a significant impact on him. Nevertheless, I felt elated. I had finally found someone who matched my teenage ideals, and he reciprocated my feelings. Initially, I idolized him, viewing him as someone to look up to. He claimed to have been an atheist, but he said my influence led him toward God and away from thoughts of violence and hatred. Interestingly, I started as the archetypical, crazy girlfriend, while he seemed more detached. But after about 2 years, especially following a prolonged breakup, during which I briefly dated someone else, and attracted attention from other men, the dynamics shifted considerably, and he became incredibly possessive and obsessive, which unexpectedly endeared him to me. He was interested in some extreme practices: blood and knife play, bondage, inflicting pain, consensual non-consent, necrophilia, and degradation, though he never used the most derogatory terms, only sexual terminology, which he gradually introduced me to. Some of these practices confused me, but I genuinely wanted to please him and was clueless about the dynamics of relationships, so I simply went along with everything. Over time, I also began to find enjoyment in these activities. It wasn't as though he coerced me. If I ever expressed hesitation, he was fine with stepping back, although I often felt I disappointed him and did not fulfill his needs. As previously mentioned, I too started to relish these experiences. However, during arguments, on rare occasions, he called me derogatory names, specific ones when he felt uncomfortable about my male friends. I didn't mind his dislike for my friendships with men because I found possessiveness and obsession appealing. He also expressed a desire to hit and choke me. These incidents occurred maybe a handful of times, and he was always exceedingly apologetic afterward, often right after making such statements. It's important to note that I wasn't innocent in this situation either. I have said hurtful things to him as well, which likely impacted his self-esteem and mental health, and I genuinely feel remorse over that. When we reconciled, I frequently felt that embracing or requesting more pain during our role plays was a way to atone for my hurtful words and to demonstrate my unwavering love, desire, and attraction. Now, I contemplate the comments he made during arguments and wonder if this stemmed from my allowance and participation in those behaviors. If someone is permitted to spank and hit you and use degrading language in intimate settings, and you respond with submission to their exertion of power, how could they differentiate between that and everyday interactions? Nevertheless, we both believed we shared a profound bond, having remarkably similar interests, humor, morals, views, and values, even sharing similar writing styles. A quote from Wuthering Heights perfectly encapsulated our feelings back then. He is more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. And if all else remained and we were annihilated, the universe would turn into a mighty stranger. He is always, always in my thoughts, not as a source of pleasure, but as part of my own being. However, I eventually drifted as reality set in, and our relationship concluded after several years over a decade ago, when I made the decision not to take him back for the umpteenth time after he left. I came to realize that other men, those who had their lives in order, began expressing interest in me, and I began seeking genuine connections. He was not serious about educational pursuits or securing a job. The first few instances of him leaving after an argument were immensely traumatic for me, but after enduring that for years, I became emotionally drained, unaffected, and ultimately moved on. During one of our more extended separations, I had a boyfriend in real life, and we engaged in kissing like ordinary teenagers a few times, which sufficed for me. I didn't require anything extreme. Merely having a man's heavier form atop me, acknowledging my physical vulnerability and inability to resist, was more than adequate for those moments. It's not that I can't derive pleasure without envisioning such scenarios, but the intensity differs, and the longing is omnipresent in the background. I find myself constantly craving more intensity, more passion, more rawness, and more vulnerability. On a scale from 1 to 10, I require everything to be pushed to an 11. Clearly, most understand that being choked by someone is a significant risk factor for actual harm. Someone who uses derogatory terms during intimacy is unlikely to treat you with respect or dignity outside of that context, correct? I do not want to desire these things. I fear that it may lead to a lack of respect and potential abuse in a relationship or marriage. I want to be ordinary, rational, healthy, and gravitate towards positivity, rather than being drawn into darkness. Why do I feel so incredibly abnormal, and how can I remedy this situation? I wish to be free from these desires. I feel revolted and ashamed. I am unsure if this is pertinent, but I was recently diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, possessing some traits of obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. I have been on non-stimulant medication for approximately 6 months, yet it hasn't altered this aspect of my identity in the slightest. By the way, I don't engage with pornography or anything similar, so it's not a matter of addiction to adult content. Story 5. I stashed a laptop in my locker to bait a thief. 3 days later, cops tracked the kid who stole it, revealing a huge theft ring. This event took place during the early 2000s, likely in the 2003-2004 academic year. Throughout that year, there was a noticeable wave of thefts, with numerous individuals reporting items stolen from their secured lockers. While not everyone was affected, there were enough cases that it felt like everyone knew someone who had experienced loss. The school's only explanation for this issue was that it was our fault for sharing our locker combinations with friends. Additionally, they charged us every time we needed to change the combination on a locker, particularly after an incident of theft, assuming it was our responsibility. I personally had my graphing calculator removed from my locker. I had never shared my locker code with anyone, mainly because my friends were not trustworthy, and we often played pranks on each other. Consequently, I ended up losing $150 for the calculator and another $150 to change the lock combination, which involved hiring a locksmith. Given that this occurred in 2003, the amount would be equivalent to a bit more today. Anyone who purchased a TI-86 during 2003 or 2004 understands how expensive they were. My father happened to be friends with a county detective, whom I will refer to as Detective Buddy or Uncle Buddy. He approached the school to discuss the series of thefts and to obtain the security footage from the day my calculator disappeared, but he was completely dismissed, with the school asserting it was a non-existent problem and suggesting I must have shared my combination. The principal informed him that reporting the theft required a warrant, and upon obtaining one, the school contested it in court, citing student privacy concerns. Enter the retaliation. Detective Buddy arrived at our home with a laptop in a carrying case. He instructed me to place it in my locker and inform everyone I knew about my brand new laptop. Okay, sure, Uncle Buddy. 3 days later, I returned to my locker in between classes only to find the laptop missing, along with the bag and a 24-ounce bottle of soda, along with possibly a few pens. I took out my phone and messaged him that the laptop had been stolen. Prepare for chaos, and by the way, you reported the theft to the police for your information, he replied. All right, I responded, feeling confused. I continued with my day and did not receive any further updates. The next morning, Detective Buddy arrived at the school accompanied by 3 uniformed officers and pulled a student named Dave out of class, along with his mother, who worked in the front office. The principal was furious. Although I did not hear the confrontation, it was clear that he was extremely upset about being accused of theft and about the detective's boldness in addressing the situation. It turns out there was a tracking device in the laptop bag, and Uncle Buddy secured a warrant to search a specific residence. The laptop was valued at over $1,000, which elevated the crime to a felony. The following afternoon, he set up a stand just outside the school grounds with a sign stating, "If you have had something stolen from your locker, see me." By the next morning, Dave and his mother were featured in the newspaper. Allegedly, Dave had used his mother's login information to access the school network and discover the locker combinations for nearly everyone. He then randomly opened lockers in search of valuables unless he had specific locker information. When he created the stand to collect more theft reports, he amassed an impressive number of charges. Each locker break-in counted as a distinct misdemeanor unless the stolen item was valued at more than $1,000, in which case it constituted a felony. Within less than a week, Uncle Buddy had initiated an investigation that led to charges against Dave and his mother, totaling 9 felonies and 35 misdemeanors. When I finally heard the details from Buddy, he clarified the strategy. He had me hide a brand new laptop equipped with a GPS tracking device in my locker, deliberately orchestrating its theft to obtain a warrant to search where it had been taken. It is important to highlight that the laptop's value exceeded $1,000, shifting the crime classification from misdemeanor to felony. There were also 8 additional felony charges related to items like jewelry stolen from other lockers that were recovered. Therefore, any locker theft exceeding $1,000 was categorized as a felony, while amounts lower remained misdemeanors. Interestingly, because the theft of the calculator and the laptop occurred on different days, with a different combination each day, they were able to prosecute both a felony and a misdemeanor against me alone. The total value of the 9 felony thefts reached around $12,000, while the 35 misdemeanor charges amounted to approximately $3,000. While this is a substantial amount of stolen property, it's essential to note that this figure only reflects what was definitively proven to have been stolen. It does not account for any additional items that might have been taken but not recovered. Furthermore, they did not permit the accused to negotiate a plea. This became the highest-profile crime case in the area in years, undoubtedly one of the worst crime sprees the county had encountered in decades. In terms of retaliation, all individuals who had been charged $150 to change their locker combinations banded together to sue the school district in a class action lawsuit. They argued that the school had neglected to investigate the 44 confirmed and likely over 200 cases of locker thefts while charging for combination changes. There were 218 individuals in the class, and after legal fees, everyone received $85. Additionally, the principal lost his job due to his failure to address the serious issue that had been reported to him. Notably, the school brought in a locksmith to change the locks, justifying their $150 fee. While they had initially settled the locksmith's fee, they were also required to reimburse $100 per locker. Ultimately, they faced a total cost of $21,800, plus their legal expenses from the class action lawsuit. Next came the criminal trial and its consequences. The prosecutor's offer was a 10-year sentence for Dave, 5 years in juvenile detention, and 5 in adult prison, and 15 years for his mother. They rejected that deal and proceeded to trial. Dave received 1 year for each felony, which was the state minimum, and 1 month of probation for each misdemeanor, totaling 9 years in prison and 35 months of probation. His mother was sentenced to 18 years of incarceration and 6 years probation. I attended many significant moments of the trial, and I can say this, they had Dave on surveillance cameras entering more than 20 lockers, with him in possession of stolen goods for every single charge made against him. The judge was also displeased, noting the likelihood of other reported thefts from which they escaped judgment, because they could not provide evidence or had not been reported at all. Dave's mother faced an even harsher outcome. Her sentencing was quite memorable. Most importantly, I was able to recover my graphing calculator, which bore my name inscribed inside the battery compartment. I still possess it, along with an interesting story to share.